July stencil here. I had a lot of feedback off the last video. It showed some locations and whatnot. So I want to show you where there's a couple of online resources that you can use if you want to do a little digging about the area that you're around, what it used to be called, some names, things like that. All right, so the first place that we're going to look at here is the USGS Historical Topographic Map Explorer. And so what we're looking at right now is the real-time picture of maps, roads, and everything. You've got a little red X that is right here. That's where I've got it zoomed into, and as we zoom in, it's going to pull up all the old topographical map data. You can kind of see the outline of Gwinnett County here. Goes down up to not far from where Thompson's Mill used to be, and then back down to where Hill's Mill was in the Appalachians. So this area down in here is where that Rowan project is going in. And then here's Little Mulberry Park, and of course Pool Mountain and the recent stacked stones are kind of in this area of concern. So as we zoom in a little bit closer and you hit this plus sign, what it will give you is a list of the old topographical maps that are available. The stuff from the 60s is good and the late 1800s is good. The Greenville ones don't provide a lot of detail. That stuff that was done in the late 50s, just not as good. But let's take a look. I'm zooming in a little bit closer here. Current day. You can see this is Mineral Springs Road as it comes down right in front of the lake there at Little Mulberry Park. Here's Old Fountain, Union Grove Church Road, Chronic Town Road, Fence Road. Of course, back in here used to be the community of Fence. So if we go back to 1964 and we bring in that layer a little bit more closely, we still see kind of where our red X is at. And one of the things to notate is that here's Union Grove and Fence Road. You notice the indications that's going to be a paved surface. Clack Road comes off and connects over to Mount Moriah Road, kind of at the top of that ridge line. There's Union Grove Church. Mineral Springs is shown right through here, kind of in a dashed line, meaning it's a pretty rough cut road that's through there. And you can see we've got a number of houses notated alongside, but there's no houses notated on Mineral Springs, and there's the top of Pool Mountain right there. So kind of gives you an idea of very little as far as any sort of housing going on back in this area at that time. Let's reach back just a little further and pull in the 1891 Gainesville Quad. And I'll have to just back off this settlement so we can see a little more clearly of it. Now, one of the things you're going to notice is that the maps don't exactly line up, so you have to do a little bit of investigation. Now, I mentioned in the past that this area has gone by several different names. The post office has changed. Here we see Canes located up near where 324 and 124 currently is, the Kroger and everything, commonly called Hog Mountain. You'll notice these roads right through here where I'm following don't cross a stream. That's your continental divide right through there, meaning water on this side goes to the Gulf, water on this side goes to the Atlantic. So that's why that road follows that route there. So at this time, Canes in 1890 was listed up here. The community that existed kind of where Mount Moriah, not far from there, kind of coming back toward where current day Mill Creek High School is, up in Duncan's Creek area. That was known as Grapevine. Before that, that area was also known as Teagle, for a family named Teagle. They had a store there, and that was the store's name, was Teagle's store, and so they did that there to host the mail for the area. Now what you'll see as we come back up this direction is that this would have been the old Hamilton Mill Road. If we went up this way, you can kind of see how it curves around. The original Hamilton Mill was much closer to Buford. But as you came down Hamilton Mill Road, you could turn and cut this way, and this cut through right here is the current day Jim Moore Road. All right, so that is where Jim Moore is, follows that direction. That was named for a settler that moved down here in the 1870s. Right in here's the original creek, and it wasn't until, I want to say it was the 50s, maybe the 60s, might have been the 60s, when the U.S. government built Little Mulberry, the lake that is Little Mulberry, for flood control purposes, that was put down here in this bottom land right in through here. So that's where Little Mulberry comes from. So this is where Jim Moore comes across. This right here is Old Fountain, and that, of course, that was realigned and readjusted in the late 90s, I think, around 96, 97. All right, back to this side. Here's Mount Moriah Road that comes up and goes over and takes us into Auburn. This would have been essentially what would be Clack Road tying into what would be Fence/County Line Road that would take us across. No traffic in through here other than this stub that comes down and falls short of crossing the Little Mulberry that would have taken you into the creek bottoms on that side. So that's how you can look at a couple of those places. Something else that is kind of useful, at the National Archives, there's a lot of digital stuff available. One of those is the records and locations of post office. And let's click here to interact and take a look at, here's Gwinnett County at one time. Here's Buford, Suwanee, Duluth. You can see that's the Southern Railway, now Norfolk Southern. And then on this end, you can see this crooked, this is the Georgia Railroad that goes around Stone Mountain and comes out through Madison in that area. Notice you don't see the railroad coming through Lawrenceville yet because it hasn't been built at this time this map was created. Let's see, here is, what is the Appalachia? Yes, the Appalachia River on this side, and on this side of the mountain would have been where the Little Mulberry would have flown down. There's Bay Creek, if you're familiar with that park, that's down that in Gwinnett County. Now notice the shape of Gwinnett County is different. That's because Barrow County is not created at this time. Barrow County cuts in and uses the old Hills Mill site on the Appalachia River as one of its corners. So that's where that weird cut comes in right here. Of course, right up here, it zigzags up to the Thompson Mill site and then straight down to this area. There's Canes shown atop this high ridge right here, which is Hog Mountain. So that gives us another idea. If you see Canes referenced in that area, that's what it's talking about. You can take your time and kind of go through these National Archives places. And just to give you an example here, let's go to one that we can find that deals with the spot we're looking at. So for example, here is in 1886, a statement about the location of Canes at Teagle's store for a post office. How much mail, and it tells you what's going on. Will it intersect with another route, saying there's no other mail route in the area? The nearest office proposed to this one, which the proposal is for Teagle's store. The nearest office is Canes, and it's 6 miles southwest. And right now it talks about the name of the nearest office to the proposed one on this route would be Malden's Mill, which by the most direct road is 3 miles northeast. Most prominent river is the Mulberry, and the name of the nearest creek is Duncan's. So that helps us follow Duncan's Creek, the Mulberry River. We know where Malden's Mill was. That was up in the corner of what is now Hall County, not far from Chateau-Alon. And the railroad closest 7 miles south of Flowery Branch. So that tells us a little bit about the details of it. Usually followed on the next page is a sketch of the proposed route. You can use this to kind of figure out, here's the railroad, there's Flowery Branch, there's Teagle's store, called out right here, next to Duncan's Creek, Price's Bridge, and then down to Canes. That tells us that's up in that Little Mulberry area. So there's Teagle's, as we would start talking about that particular area. Let's see if we can find another good one here for you to take a look at. Here is one that could also be useful, and you'll see it's Tim's on the Mulberry, drawing another map to kind of show you where things are at. A little bit later, here's the Seabourn Airline Railroad going between Winder and Auburn over to Lawrenceville. Look, there's Grapevine. We talked about that earlier. They're wanting to put this one right here on the other side of the creek. There's Teagle's store. We know that that came around. Canes will be over in this area. That helps you to sort of see a little bit more and kind of help know the area. So if you're looking to associate some names, those are a couple of things you could use. Another one that is useful that is out there, I found this one at the state archives. This is an 1833 map of the area, and it's actually written for the Cherokee removal, but it still shows the high shoals, the Appalachia, and as it comes off, there's a split. One of them is called the Old Hightower Trail that goes over to the shallow ford on the Chattahoochee above Stone Mountain. The other one comes down this way to Standing Peachtree, which is near Bolton, just north of Atlanta. This stuff, the Hightower Trail, would take you up here to the Hightower River, commonly called the Etowah River. And then you can come back up here and see here's the treaty line. So this area right in here is the original, the United States, and then it was expanded across this treaty line and across the Appalachian River to the west, kind of coming out of 1820 when Gwinnett is born. Let's take a look at Gwinnett. And here we see an 1867 map. This is available online at the Georgia Virtual Vault, Digital Archives of the state of Georgia. Let me draw in just a little bit of attention here. See, it's got Auburn marked. There's Canes, and notice that in this map, Canes is shown closer to the Mulberry River, and it's not over here on the actual mountain, so we know that Canes makes its way in this direction later on. Being this is an 1860s map, it's very early. So you'll notice there's a lot of numbers and little squares on this side, but not so much here. This is the end of the Treaty of New York in 1790. It comes down to where Fort Daniel is, the head of the Appalachian River, and all this land right in here that was part of Gwinnett County. So these lines right through here. This land right in here was what would be called headright grants. So they were given out before the Gwinnett Land Lottery of 1820 when this was part of Jackson County. Then it became part of Gwinnett County, so this land was already in the possession of somebody. The rest of the county was drawn up into districts, 7, 6, 5, 4, and then carved up into smaller lots. And then these lots were drawn by war veterans or their widows or orphans. They could get a whole lot in here, and what happened was your name was in the hat. If your name got drawn for that particular lot, all you had to do was pay the taxes on it. Now you'll notice there's some partial lots. Let's draw in on 336. The Rowan project's in this area. 336 is notable because Hill's Mill is notated on the original plat right here of the purchase of 336. What's unique is, let's say a widow or an orphan had one lot, 308. They didn't have any money to pay the taxes. That's all they had to pay. They didn't have to pay for the land, they had to pay for the taxes. But the surveyor of the state was charged with selling these partial lots because they would not put the partial lots in the lottery. So when one of these lots was sold, that money went into sort of a sinking fund or a pool, kind of a kitty, if you will. And if a widow or orphan won a lot, they would reach into that pool of money and pull out whatever the taxes and registration costs were for that lot, so that the widows or orphans would be able to get the land and the state would still get their tax money. So that's a little bit about that, how that works. That can make it difficult doing research on this side of the river where Pool Mountain is located at, because these are not the best tracked headright grants. You can find a little bit of information on them, but they're a little bit difficult to fully understand. So if you're on this side and you want to look at any of these lots, you can actually go to the Gwinnett County GIS, and it still will show the particular district number. Like here we see District 5, and it will show the individual lot numbers. So you can actually drive to where your house is, see what lot was on it. You can go to the Georgia Virtual Vault at the archives and get some information on it. You can actually drive down to the state archives and pull up information on that particular lot and see an even more intimate drawing of it. So let's take a look here at one of those. Okay, so here we're looking at, I showed you lot 336. So see that 90-degree angle, and here it's got the Appalachian River. And here is Hill's Mill on the Appalachian. That later was purchased by Dr. S.H. Freeman, and he named it Freemans Mill after that. And then another family put a Freemans Mill on the Alcovey, so this became known as Old Freemans Mill. And the new Freemans Mill was over on the Alcovey. So if you look when Barrow County was created, they will talk about one of the lines comes to the center of the Appalachian River at the Freemans Mill old site, which was Hill's Mill. This mill was here when the War of 1812 happened, because we have records of a skirmish happening here in 1815. But if we went and looked, if you wanted to find what your lot looked like, you could go to the state archives, pull up the microfilm, and you can see that this was surveyed on the 3rd day of August 1819 by Lucky, and he had 2 chain walkers that went with him. They're right here. These are their chains, and there it gives you that distance from a maple tree to a post oak to a sassafras. There's a pine mark there and a hickory mark there. Gives you the adjacent lots. On this side was 337, this side was 334, this is lot number 336, approximately 81 acres. And over here you can see purchased by Joshua Hill Jr. of Gwinnett County. The Hills, of course, own this side of the river already, so they just purchased the lot on the other side. Because it was a partial lot, it can be sold. So that's how you can drive down some of that information. Kind of come back in the Hutchins Flanagan book about red clay of the history of Auburn. She mentions that Auburn used to be several miles away from where it originally is now because they moved it closer to the railroad tracks. So this spot right here is a little bit distant from where Auburn is currently. But you'll notice there's a road that comes out of that crosses over the Appalachian River and comes into land lot number 335. So we can take that and look back at a current day map. And let's pull these layers back off of here. Let's see if we can do that. And come down just a little bit. Let me pull that layer back so we can see clearly. Here's Auburn. And we know it was a little bit further over, but essentially comes right up this way at what's known as Auburn Road. And we know it crossed. Now, I told you that reference mark, here's where Hills Mill was at. And if we go up this way, right in here or here is the original crossing of where it came across. Pretty steep right there. Benton Fence is the older one. I know that Bailey Road used to come and make a more direct path right up through here because my grandfather always talked about Bailey Woods being the oldest road in that area. And then here's Fence Road right down through here. This was known as the Fence Community. And of course, as we come across out Fence Road, here's Clack, come back out Clack, and we're right over here back at Pool Mountain. And you, of course, got your couple of high points on right back up in here where all these stacked stones are, and there's, of course, some stacked stones over on the ravine side. One other unique thing that I found in my research over time, in the National Archives at the end of the War Between the States, General Stoneman, who had been captured at Sunshine Church and then paroled, he took off after Jefferson Davis toward the end of the war and then began making a sweeping move. Now that we're fortunate in that one of his officers captured a blank book, or stole a blank book, and then started recording their travels. So on the 10th of May in 1865, Stoneman's Cavalry, 1st Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, Department of the Cumberland, began to make a move out of Athens, Georgia, and keep moving. Now they had gotten to Athens, they're just going further. Now you can follow coming out of here. Road out of Athens, there's a road to Jefferson, and then it has some names of different people, Lawrence, and then it comes down to Ferry Ford and it says Mitchell's Bridge, said to have been across this stream, no signs of it now. So they may have taken that road down below. That's the Oconee River is what they crossed. Then it goes off, says here, 7 miles from town, 35 miles to Lawrenceville. Notice Daniel McCluskey, and then there's a road right here to Watkinsville, and this road will take you to Monroe. They're giving you the names of family members out through here. So if you see kind of some legacy location names, you can associate them with this. There's a meeting house, Ferguson's Pottery, and they keep moving along. Arnold Austin Smith, they get outside of Watkinsville, and here's the Hog Mountain Road, and they make a right-hand turn out the Hog Mountain Road. If you're outside of Watkinsville or you're driving around on the skirts of it, you see Hog Mountain Road. That is this road. It takes you over to Hog Mountain, right across, not far from Pool Mountain and Little Mulberry Park. Get right here, it says Bush Jug Tavern, Jefferson 12 miles. This is Winder, of course known as Jug Tavern before. Come along, Goodwin's, Gainesville, and it looks Causeway, Millsaps, Bridgehead. So this is where they stayed that night. Now if we go on to the next day, they make their way all the way to Lawrenceville. They come off, they come into Auburn. Here's the road to Monroe. They make a right-hand turn and come out Robinson Parks. It's a long time name in the area. They cross over Berry Branch, and then it says here's the Hill residence, and that's my ancestors. They lived just on the road that took you down to the Appalachia Creek. And there was a legend in the family that the Yankees came by at the end of the war and threatened the family and everything else. And I couldn't believe that ever happened until we stumbled across this map, and then it did prove that the story could be feasible. That in fact there were people living there named Hill on a route taken by a bunch of cavalry soldiers. Goose McAdams, longtime Tequila resident, is actually in possession of a newspaper article from Texas in the 20s where a widow by the name of Vinland, who grew up in this area, mentions that at the end of the war, the Yankees rode up and down the road for a couple of days, terrorizing everybody. So they could have been in the area. This proves that they could have come right by that house. Cross over Appalachia, go up by the Dodds house, and you'll see Chinkapin Grove. The actual Chinkapin Grove is located where Tequila Elementary is now. There was a grove of chinkapin trees back in there that my grandfather used to speak of, so that is where Chinkapin Grove got its name. Come up to the top of the hill and you'll see Dr. Freeman and a blacksmith shop. This is Dr. Freeman's house, of course, is long gone. You've got a Shell station there, a Starbucks, a Kroger, the U.S. Post Office, and Hebron Church is right here where this blacksmith shop is located. But this is where that all happened at. It was right in that area. If you continue down that road and you come up here and you see graveyard and a church, this was the old Pleasant Hill Church. The graveyard is still there. It's actually across the railroad tracks behind where that QT is at, where 316 crosses over Old 29 right there. So that graveyard is still there, and there was a church there. That Methodist church later moved up in town to become Hinton Memorial Methodist. Came down the hill, there's Harris Mill. There's still supposedly some ruins of that mill upstream, and this would be just down below Stars and Strikes. They called this area coming back up Kings Hill because it went by the King's residence, and you can see that on some of the other maps. You'll see Kings notated right there. But come back up Strickland. There was another 2 Wilson's Mill off that side, 2 miles from town, and then they come up and they get into Lawrenceville. Just for giggles, when they left Lawrenceville, they made a turn and eventually crossed the Chattahoochee. But as they went out, they crossed the Yellow River, the Montgomery Branch, Wolf Creek, and then they get up here and they cross over this road. It says to Hog Mountain 15 miles and to Atlanta 25 miles. And this is what is now labeled as Old Peachtree Road. So this area is not far from where the Swanee exit is off of I-85. As you come back across, you'll see that Peachtree Road crosses a couple of things right in there. So it's somewhere kind of right in that. That gives you an idea, and then they went across the Chattahoochee and went back over to that side of the river. So you can take a look. All those things are online. You can poke around at them and maybe give a little bit more information about the area. So I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have any comments or questions, be sure to let me know. Thanks again, Eli Stansel.